He had everything. Billions in the bank, a legendary career spanning 3 continents, a wife who stood by him for 22 years. Marcos Santos was the golden boy of Brazilian football, the kind of player who made stadiums shake with his name alone. But when his wife's 22-year-old niece arrived in Manchester for the summer, everything changed. What started as innocent family time became an obsession that would destroy empires, shatter families, and expose the dark side of wealth and power. This is the price of betrayal. And if you want to know what happens next, subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. This story will shock you. The penthouse overlooked Manchester like a throne overlooking a kingdom. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city below, where millions of ordinary people lived ordinary lives. Marcos Santos stood at one of those windows, a glass of 1995 Chateau Margaux in his hand, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and crimson. At 38 years old, he had achieved what most men only dream about. He had transcended the sport. He wasn't just a footballer anymore. He was a brand, an institution, a living legend. The numbers told the story of his ascension. 417 million euros in career earnings. Endorsement deals with every major brand on the planet. A contract with Manchester United that made him the highest paid player in Premier League history. Sponsorships with Nike, Rolex, Lamborghini, and a dozen other names that represented the apex of luxury. His net worth had crossed the billion-dollar mark 3 years ago. A milestone that had been celebrated across sports media like a coronation. Marcos Santos, the kid from the favelas of Rio de Janeiro, had become a billionaire. But standing in that penthouse, watching the city lights flicker to life below, Marcos felt something he couldn't quite name. It wasn't unhappiness exactly. It was more like a persistent ache, a sense that something essential had been lost somewhere along the way. The kind of feeling you get when you've climbed a mountain so high that you can no longer see the ground you started from. Isabella was in the master bedroom, preparing for another charity gala. Their marriage had become a series of public appearances and private silences. 22 years of marriage, and they had perfected the art of existing in the same space without truly connecting. She had been there from the beginning, back when Marcos was playing for small clubs in the Brazilian second division, when their apartment had been a studio in a working-class neighborhood, when their dreams were modest and their love was fierce. Isabella had sacrificed everything. Her own career as a physiotherapist had been abandoned when Marcos's football took off. She had followed him from Rio to São Paulo, from São Paulo to Portugal, from Portugal to England. She had raised their 2 children, now both in university, with the kind of grace and strength that went unnoticed by the world. While Marcos was celebrated in stadiums, Isabella was managing households, handling crises, and maintaining the facade of a perfect marriage. But perfection, Marcos had learned, was exhausting. And somewhere in the last 5 years, exhaustion had transformed into resentment. Isabella had stopped laughing at his jokes. She had stopped touching him the way she used to. She had started spending more time with her friends, more time on her phone, more time anywhere but with him. And Marcos, rather than fighting for the marriage, had simply accepted it. He had convinced himself that this was what marriage looked like after 2 decades. He had convinced himself that the spark was supposed to fade. The truth was more complicated. Marcos had changed. The boy from Rio who had dreamed of playing football had become a man obsessed with winning at everything. He had won on the pitch, won in business, won in the court of public opinion. But he had lost something in the process. He had lost the capacity to be satisfied. He had lost the ability to appreciate what he had. He had lost touch with the person he used to be. His phone buzzed. A message from Isabella. Sophia arrives tomorrow at 2 p.m. Can you pick her up from the airport? Sophia. Isabella's niece. Marcos had met her a handful of times over the years, always in group settings, always in the context of family gatherings. She was beautiful, of course. Everyone in Rio seemed to be beautiful. But more than that, she was young. Not just chronologically young, but young in the way that only people in their early 20s could be young. She had that quality that Marcos had almost forgotten existed, genuine enthusiasm for life. She posted on Instagram, had hundreds of thousands of followers, was building some kind of career as an influencer. Marcos had never really understood what that meant, but he knew it involved being beautiful and having opinions about fashion and travel. He typed back, "Of course, what time?" 2 p.m. Flight BA 287 from Rio. She's staying for 6 weeks. I'm so excited to see her. We haven't spent real time together in almost 2 years. Marcos set the phone down and returned to the window. 6 weeks. That was a long time for a house guest, but it would be fine. It would probably be good, actually. It might remind Isabella of home, of her family, of the things that mattered before football and money had consumed their lives. He had no idea how wrong he was. The airport was crowded with the usual chaos of international travel. Marcus wore sunglasses and a baseball cap, the uniform of famous people trying not to be recognized. It worked about 60% of the time. The other 40% involved awkward conversations with fans who wanted selfies or autographs, or just wanted to tell him how much his football meant to them. He was holding a sign with Sophia written on it, feeling slightly ridiculous when he saw her coming through arrivals. She was smaller than he remembered, more delicate, with long dark hair that fell past her shoulders. She was wearing white sneakers, ripped jeans, and an oversized hoodie that said Rio or Bust in faded letters. She had a roller bag in one hand and a phone in the other, and she was filming herself as she walked, narrating something to her followers. When she saw the sign, her face lit up with a smile that was pure joy. She abandoned the phone, abandoned the performance, and rushed toward him with the kind of enthusiasm that only comes from genuine affection. "Marcus!" She threw her arms around him, and he found himself holding a girl who smelled like airplane and coconut shampoo, and something else he couldn't quite identify. "I can't believe you came to pick me up. Tia Isabella said you might send a driver." "Of course I came," he said, and he meant it. There was something about her energy that was infectious, something that made him feel less like a billionaire businessman and more like a regular person. "How was the flight?" "Long," she said, pulling back to look at him. "But I slept most of the way. I'm so excited to see Manchester. I've heard so much about it, and I want to see where you train and the stadium and everything. This is going to be amazing." As they walked to the car, Sophia talked constantly. She told him about her followers, about a brand deal she was negotiating, about a boy back in Rio who had broken her heart, about her plans to expand her content into fashion and travel. She was animated and genuine, and Marcus found himself genuinely enjoying the conversation in a way he hadn't enjoyed talking to anyone in months. The drive from the airport to the penthouse took 40 minutes. Sophia spent the entire time with her face pressed against the window, taking in the English countryside, the motorway, the gradual transformation into the urban landscape of Manchester. She narrated parts of it for her Instagram story, but mostly she just looked and wondered and asked questions. "Is it always this gray?" she asked at one point. "Mostly," Marcus said. "But you get used to it." "I don't think I could get used to it," she said. "Rio is always bright, always warm. I miss it already. And I've only been gone for 6 hours." There was something in the way she said it that made Marcus feel a sudden, unexpected wave of nostalgia. He missed Rio too. He missed the heat, the chaos, the energy of the city. He missed the person he had been there, before the money, before the fame, before he had become this carefully constructed version of himself. Isabella was waiting at the penthouse when they arrived. She and Sophia embraced like they hadn't seen each other in years, which, in a way, they hadn't. They had video called, of course, but video calls were never the same as being in the same room, breathing the same air, existing in the same space. "You look so beautiful," Isabella kept saying. "So grown up, so different." "You look exactly the same," Sophia said. "Exactly like I remembered." Marcus watched them together and felt something shift in his chest. This was what he had been missing. This kind of connection. This kind of genuine affection. Isabella's face, which had been closed off and distant for so long, was suddenly open and alive. She was laughing, really laughing, in a way that made her look like the girl he had fallen in love with all those years ago. That night, they had dinner together in the penthouse. Sophia told stories about Rio, about her friends, about the influencer scene in Brazil. She made them laugh with impressions of people they didn't know, with observations about the absurdity of social media culture, with the kind of self-deprecating humor that only comes from someone who is genuinely comfortable in their own skin. Marcus found himself watching her more than he was eating. Not in a way that was inappropriate exactly, but in a way that was definitely more than casual interest. She had this quality, this presence, that drew attention. When she spoke, the room seemed to shrink around her. When she laughed, it felt like the most important sound in the world. Isabella didn't seem to notice. She was too busy enjoying her niece, too busy reconnecting with a piece of her home that had been missing from her life. After dinner, Sophia went to bed, exhausted from the flight and the time change. Marcus and Isabella sat on the balcony, looking out at the Manchester skyline. For the first time in months, they sat in comfortable silence. Isabella reached over and took his hand, and he felt a spark of hope. Maybe this was what they needed. Maybe having Sophia here would remind them of what they had lost. and they could find their way back to each other. "She's wonderful, isn't she?" Isabella said softly. "She is," Marcus agreed. "I'm so glad she's here. I feel like I can breathe again." Marcus squeezed her hand, but he didn't say anything, because even as he held his wife's hand, even as she talked about breathing again, he couldn't stop thinking about the way Sophia's eyes had lit up when she saw him at the airport. He couldn't stop thinking about the way she had thrown her arms around him without hesitation or self-consciousness. He couldn't stop thinking about the way she made him feel alive in a way he hadn't felt in years. And that, more than anything else, should have been a warning. That should have been the moment when he recognized the danger. But Marcus had spent his entire life ignoring warnings. He had spent his entire life believing that he was special, that the rules that applied to other people didn't apply to him. He had spent his entire life being rewarded for taking risks, for pushing boundaries, for doing things that other people were too afraid to do. So when the spark ignited, when the first real moment of temptation arrived, he didn't extinguish it. He let it burn. The first 2 weeks of Sophia's stay were relatively innocent. She and Marcus fell into a pattern of casual interaction. He would take her to see Manchester, showing her the stadium, introducing her to some of his teammates, taking her to restaurants that she documented meticulously for her Instagram followers. Isabella was usually there, or at least present in spirit, approving of the outings, grateful that Marcus was making an effort to make Sophia feel welcome. But there were moments when Isabella was busy with something else, moments when it was just the two of them, moments that seemed to stretch and expand in ways that moments shouldn't. One afternoon, Marcus was in the home gym, working through his usual routine. He was on the treadmill, running at a pace that would have exhausted most people, when Sophia appeared in the doorway. "Mind if I work out?" she asked. She was wearing black leggings and a sports bra, her dark hair pulled back in a tight ponytail. "Of course not," he said, trying to keep his voice casual. "The equipment is all yours." She moved to the weights section and started doing some light exercises. Marcus tried to focus on his running, but his attention kept drifting. He found himself watching her in the mirror, watching the way her muscles moved, watching the concentration on her face as she lifted. "You're very disciplined," she said after about 15 minutes. "I could never do what you do. The dedication, the sacrifice. It's insane." "It's just habit," Marcus said. "After a while, it becomes who you are." "That must be lonely," she said. "Sacrificing everything for one thing." He slowed the treadmill and stepped off, breathing heavily. "It is," he admitted. "More than you'd think." She set down her weights and looked at him directly. "That's sad. You shouldn't have to sacrifice everything. You should be able to have both. Success and happiness, fame and love. Everything. That's not how the world works," he said. "Maybe not," she said. "But it should." There was something in the way she said it, something in her eyes, that made Marcus feel like she was talking about more than just the abstract concept of having it all. It felt like she was talking about him specifically. It felt like she was saying that he deserved more, that he deserved her. He turned away and grabbed a towel, suddenly aware that he was sweating more than the exercise warranted. Over the next week, these moments multiplied. They would find themselves alone in the kitchen late at night, and she would make him tea while they talked about everything and nothing. They would be in the car together, driving somewhere, and she would rest her hand on his arm while she laughed at something he said. They would be watching a film in the living room, and she would curl up on the sofa next to him, her shoulder brushing against his. Isabella noticed none of it. Or if she did, she didn't say anything. She was too busy enjoying having her niece around, too busy being reminded of home, too busy being happy for the first time in years. Marcus told himself that nothing was happening. He told himself that he was just being friendly, just being welcoming, just being a good uncle figure. He told himself that the way his heart raced when Sophia entered a room was just the natural response of a man who was finally feeling something after years of numbness. He told himself that the way he found excuses to be alone with her was just coincidence. But deep down, he knew the truth. Deep down, he knew that something had shifted, that a line was being approached, that if he didn't pull back, he would cross it. The moment came on a Thursday evening. Isabella was at a charity event, one of the endless social obligations that came with being married to a famous footballer. Marcus had begged off, claiming fatigue, claiming he needed to rest before the weekend match. In reality, he had known that Sophia would be home alone, and he had engineered the situation deliberately. They were in the home theater, watching a film. Sophia had chosen it, some romantic drama about two people who shouldn't be together but fell in love anyway. The irony wasn't lost on Marcus. They sat on opposite ends of the sofa, a careful distance between them, but as the film progressed, Sophia gradually moved closer. By the time the main characters were kissing on screen, she was pressed against his side. "This is my favorite part," she whispered. When they finally admit how they feel, Marcus didn't respond. He couldn't. His throat was tight, his heart was pounding, and his entire body was screaming at him to do something, to say something, to acknowledge what was happening. The characters on screen kissed again, more passionately this time. Sophia turned to look at him, and their faces were suddenly very close. He could smell her perfume, could see the slight rise and fall of her breathing, could see the question in her eyes. "Sophia," he said, and his voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. "We can't." "Why not?" she asked. Her voice was soft, almost innocent. "We're both adults. We both want this." "Because of Isabella," he said. "Because of your family. Because it's wrong." "Is it?" she asked. "Or is it just what everyone expects us to think? I've been watching you, Marcus. I've been watching how unhappy you are. How trapped. I could make you happy. I know I could." He should have gotten up. He should have left the room. He should have done any number of things that would have prevented what happened next. But he didn't. Instead, he leaned forward and he kissed her. It was soft at first, tentative, like he was testing the reality of the situation. But then she deepened it, and he felt himself falling into something that he couldn't climb out of. Her hands moved to his face, his hands moved to her waist, and for a moment, the world outside that room ceased to exist. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Marcus felt a wave of shame so intense that it nearly knocked him over. What had he done? What was he doing? "We can't do this again," he said. This was a mistake, a terrible mistake. But even as he said it, he knew he was lying. Even as he said it, he was already planning when they could do it again. For the next 3 weeks, Marcus and Sophia conducted an affair that was both reckless and meticulously planned. They had learned quickly that the key to not getting caught was compartmentalization. They never touched each other when Isabella was around. They never exchanged messages that could be traced. They never gave any indication that anything had changed between them. But in the stolen moments, in the spaces between Isabella's obligations and the demands of Marcus's football career, they became something else entirely. They became lovers, conspirators, partners in a secret that grew more dangerous with every passing day. They would meet in the guest house that sat at the edge of the penthouse property, a space that was technically part of the residence but felt separate enough to be safe. They would meet in hotels across Manchester, always paying cash, always using false names. They would meet in the car, parked in secluded locations, with the windows fogged and the world shut out. Sophia was intoxicating. She was young and beautiful and utterly fascinated by him. She looked at him like he was a god, like everything he did was brilliant and important and worthy of worship. After years of Isabella's indifference, after years of feeling invisible despite being the most visible person in the room, Sophia's attention was like a drug. She would trace her fingers along his chest and tell him that he was the most handsome man she had ever seen. She would listen to his stories about football and business and life with genuine interest, asking questions, laughing at his jokes, making him feel like the most interesting person in the world. She would tell him that he deserved to be happy, that he deserved to be with someone who appreciated him, that she would never take him for granted the way Isabella did. And Marcus, who had spent the last 5 years feeling like a stranger in his own marriage, believed every word of it. The affair changed him. He became more attentive to his appearance, more careful about his grooming, more conscious of the way he presented himself. He started working out with even more intensity, pushing his body to new limits, driven by a desire to be worthy of Sophia's admiration. He became more generous with his time, more willing to leave training early or skip team events if it meant he could be with her. His performance on the pitch actually improved. There was something about the adrenaline, the danger, the constant state of heightened awareness that made him play with a sharpness he hadn't felt in years. His teammates noticed it. The media noticed it. Everyone was talking about how Marcos Santos seemed to have found a new gear, how he was playing like a man possessed. If only they knew the truth. Isabella began to notice that something was different, but she misinterpreted the signs. She thought that Marcus's improved mood and increased energy meant that he was finally happy again, that maybe their marriage was turning a corner. She started making more of an effort. She would dress up for him, would try to initiate intimacy, would plan special evenings where it was just the two of them. And Marcus, racked with guilt, would accept her advances while thinking about Sophia. He would make love to his wife while imagining his wife's niece. He would hold Isabella while feeling like a monster. Sophia, meanwhile, was documenting everything for her Instagram followers. She posted pictures from Manchester, pictures from the stadiums, pictures from the restaurants and clubs that Marcus took her to. She posted carefully curated content that showed her living a glamorous life, traveling with a famous footballer, experiencing the kind of luxury that most people only dreamed about. She didn't post pictures of Marcus directly, but she posted pictures of his penthouse, his cars, his world. Her followers loved it. Her engagement skyrocketed. Brands started reaching out, offering her sponsorship deals, wanting to be associated with her lifestyle. The affair had made her famous. And fame, Marcus was beginning to realize, was more intoxicating to Sophia than love. There were moments when he would catch her filming herself, narrating their relationship to her followers in carefully veiled language. "Spending time with someone special," she would say, or "living my best life with an incredible person," or "sometimes the best things in life are the ones you don't expect." She was turning their affair into content, and her followers were eating it up. Marcus should have been alarmed by this. He should have recognized that Sophia was using him, that she was more interested in the lifestyle he provided than in him as a person. But he was too far gone. He had convinced himself that he was in love with her, that what they had was real, that eventually he would leave Isabella and they would build a life together. He had convinced himself of a beautiful lie. The first real crack in the facade came 6 weeks into Sophia's stay, when she was supposed to return to Rio. She didn't want to go. She begged Marcos to let her stay longer. She told him that she couldn't bear to be separated from him, that Rio felt like a prison compared to Manchester, that she wanted to stay with him forever. Marcos, desperate to keep her, told her to stay. He would handle Isabella. He would figure something out. They would make it work. But Sophia had other ideas. She told him that she wanted to move into the penthouse officially, that she wanted to stop hiding, that she wanted everyone to know that they were together. She wanted the world to know that she had won, that she had taken the billionaire footballer away from his boring wife. "We can't do that," Marcus said. "It would destroy Isabella. It would destroy your relationship with your family." "I don't care," Sophia said, and there was something cold in her eyes when she said it. "I'm tired of hiding. I'm tired of pretending. I want my life back, and I want you in it. Publicly. Officially." "Give me time," Marcus pleaded. "Let me figure out how to tell her." But time, as it turned out, was something they didn't have. Isabella found the messages on a Tuesday afternoon. She had been looking for something else entirely, scrolling through the cloud storage on the family iPad, trying to find a photo from their anniversary trip to Portugal. Instead, she found a folder labeled Manchester Memories, and inside that folder were hundreds of photographs. Pictures of Marcus and Sophia together. Pictures of them in hotels. Pictures of them in the guest house. Pictures of them in the car. Kissing, touching, lost in each other. There were also messages, thousands of them, synced across devices, a complete record of their affair laid out in brutal detail. Isabella sat on the edge of the bed in their master bedroom and read through the messages with the kind of detached horror that comes from discovering something so devastating that your mind can't quite process it. She read Sophia telling Marcus that she loved him. She read Marcus telling Sophia that he had never felt this way before. She read them planning a future together, discussing how they would tell Isabella, debating whether they should wait until Sophia's contract with her brands was finalized before going public. The cruelty of it was almost worse than the betrayal itself. They weren't just having an affair. They were planning how to do it. They were treating her like an obstacle to be overcome, a problem to be solved, a minor inconvenience in their grand romance. Isabella's hands were shaking as she scrolled through the messages. She felt like she was drowning, like the ground beneath her was disappearing. 22 years. 22 years of sacrifice, of compromise, of putting Marcus's career first, of following him across the world, of building a life with him. And this was how he repaid her, with her own niece, with a girl she had raised like a daughter. She heard the front door open. Marcus was home from training. She heard him moving through the penthouse, heard him calling out for her. She didn't respond. She couldn't. She was still sitting on the bed, the iPad in her hands, trying to figure out how to breathe. He found her there. When he saw the iPad, when he saw her face, he knew immediately that everything was over. "Isabella," he said, and his voice sounded like it was coming from very far away. "I can explain." "Explain what?" she said. Her voice was quiet. which was somehow worse than if she had screamed. Explain how you've been fucking my niece for the last 6 weeks? Explain how you've been lying to my face every single day? Explain how you could do this to me? It's not what you think, he said. And the moment the words left his mouth, he knew how pathetic they sounded. It's exactly what I think, Isabella said. She stood up and her legs were shaking so badly that she had to hold onto the bedpost to stay upright. Where is she? She's at a shoot, Marcus said, for one of her sponsors. Of course she is, Isabella said. Documenting her glamorous life. Did she post about us? Did she tell her followers about how she stole her aunt's husband? It's not like that, Marcus said. You don't understand. We didn't plan this. It just happened. It just happened? Isabella laughed and the sound was brittle and broken. You've been meeting in hotels. You've been using the guest house. You've been lying to me every single day. That's not something that just happens, Marcus. That's something you choose. Over and over again, you chose this. She moved toward the door, and Marcus reached out to stop her. Where are you going? He asked. Away, she said. I'm going to stay with a friend. And tomorrow, I'm calling a lawyer. I'm calling my family. And I'm going to make sure that everyone knows exactly what you've done. Isabella, please, he said. Don't do this. We can work through this. We can go to therapy, we can… No, she said, and she pulled her arm away from him. We can't. You destroyed this marriage the moment you touched her. You destroyed it the moment you chose your own pleasure over your marriage vows. You destroyed it the moment you decided that I wasn't enough for you. She packed a bag in less than 10 minutes. She moved through the penthouse like a ghost, gathering the things she needed, her hands moving on autopilot while her mind tried to process what had happened. Marcus followed her, pleading with her, trying to explain, trying to make her understand that he hadn't meant for it to happen this way. But Isabella wasn't listening anymore. She had moved beyond anger into something colder and more dangerous: clarity. She could see the situation with perfect, crystalline precision. She could see that her marriage was over. She could see that her family was destroyed. She could see that the life she had built with Marcus had been a lie. She called a taxi from the lobby of the building, and as she waited for it to arrive, she called her lawyer. She called her mother in Rio. She called her best friend. She told them all the same thing. Her marriage was over, and she was going to make sure that Marcus paid for what he had done. When the taxi arrived, she didn't look back at the penthouse. She didn't look back at the life she had built there. She simply got in the car and drove away, leaving behind 22 years of marriage and a husband who was finally beginning to understand what he had lost. The news broke on a Wednesday morning. It started with a single post on a gossip website, a blind item about a famous footballer, and a scandal involving family members. Within hours, the story had spread across every major sports outlet in the world. By noon, the tabloids had identified Marcus by name. By evening, they had identified Sophia. The headlines were brutal. Betrayal in Manchester. Billionaire footballer caught in affair with wife's niece. From hero to villain. How Marcus Santos destroyed his family. The price of fame. Inside the scandal that rocked the football world. The story had everything that the media loved. It had wealth. It had power. It had sex. It had betrayal. It had a beautiful young woman and a famous man. It had a wronged wife and a destroyed family. It had all the elements of a perfect scandal, and the media was determined to milk it for every possible angle. Isabella's statement, released through her lawyer, was dignified and devastating. She talked about 22 years of marriage, about the sacrifices she had made, about the trust that had been broken. She didn't attack Marcus directly, but she didn't need to. Her pain was evident in every carefully chosen word. I have always supported my husband's career, the statement read. I have followed him across the world, raised our children, and built a life with him based on trust and commitment. That trust has been violated in the most painful way possible. I am heartbroken, but I am also determined to move forward with my life and to ensure that my children are protected during this difficult time. The statement was released to the press at the same time that Isabella filed for divorce. She was asking for half of Marcus's assets, full custody of their children, and a substantial monthly support payment. She was also, according to sources close to the family, planning to press charges against Sophia for her role in the affair. Sophia's response was immediate and in its own way more damaging than anything Isabella had said. She posted a series of Instagram stories that were part confession, part justification, part celebration. She talked about how she had fallen in love with Marcus, how he had fallen in love with her, how their connection was real and meaningful and worth the cost. Sometimes love doesn't follow the rules, she wrote. Sometimes it shows up in unexpected places, with unexpected people. I know that what happened is painful for everyone involved, but I also know that Marcus and I are meant to be together. We're not going to apologize for our feelings. The post was liked by hundreds of thousands of people. The comment section was split between people who thought she was brave and people who thought she was a monster. But the engagement was astronomical. Her follower count jumped by 1 million in a single day. Brands that had been interested in working with her suddenly became very interested. Her notoriety had made her famous in a way that her influencer content never could have. Marcus, meanwhile, was in freefall. His team at Manchester United issued a statement saying that they were deeply disappointed by his actions and that they were reviewing the situation. The implication was clear: his time at the club was over. Within 48 hours, rumors began circulating that he would be released from his contract. Within a week, it was official. Manchester United had terminated his contract, citing conduct unbecoming of a player and damage to the reputation of the club. The Brazilian Football Confederation announced that they were investigating whether Marcus's actions violated the code of conduct for national team players. There was talk of him being banned from representing Brazil in international competitions. There was talk of him being stripped of honors and awards. His endorsement deals began to collapse like dominoes. Nike dropped him. Rolex dropped him. Lamborghini dropped him. One by one, the brands that had paid him hundreds of millions of dollars to represent them decided that the association was no longer worth it. By the end of the week, he had lost approximately 400 million euros in sponsorship deals. The financial impact was staggering, but the emotional impact was worse. Marcus found himself isolated in a way that he had never experienced before. His teammates wouldn't return his calls. His friends disappeared. Even his own family was divided. His father, Carlos, released a statement saying that he was ashamed of his son and that he no longer recognized the man he had become. That statement, more than anything else, broke Marcus. He had spent his entire life trying to make his father proud, trying to prove that the sacrifices his family had made for his career were worth it. And now, at the moment of his greatest success, he had become his father's greatest disappointment. Sophia, for her part, seemed to be thriving on the chaos. She was everywhere. She was doing interviews with major media outlets, telling her side of the story, positioning herself as a victim of circumstance who had simply fallen in love with the wrong person. She was using the scandal to build her brand, to increase her visibility, to transform herself from a minor influencer into a major media personality. But there was something hollow about her success. The people who had loved her before the scandal began to turn on her. Her own family, horrified by what she had done, began to distance themselves from her. Her mother issued a statement saying that she was deeply ashamed of her daughter and that she was seeking family counseling to understand how this happened. Sophia's Instagram comments, which had initially been full of supportive messages, began to fill with hate. People called her a homewrecker, a gold digger, a selfish bitch who had destroyed her family for fame and money. The same people who had been fascinated by her lifestyle suddenly became disgusted by it. And Sophia, who had built her entire identity on being loved and admired, began to crumble under the weight of that hatred. 3 months after the scandal broke, Marcus was a shell of the man he had been. He had moved out of the penthouse and into a modest apartment in a less fashionable part of Manchester. He had hired a team of lawyers to defend him against the various lawsuits and investigations that were being launched against him. He had entered therapy trying to understand how he had managed to destroy his life so completely. The divorce proceedings were brutal. Isabella's lawyers were merciless, presenting evidence of his infidelity, his financial irresponsibility, his emotional abuse. Marcus's lawyers fought back, but they were fighting a losing battle. The court was sympathetic to Isabella. The public was sympathetic to Isabella. Even Marcus's own legal team seemed to be sympathetic to Isabella. In the end, he was ordered to pay Isabella 150 million euros in a settlement. He was ordered to pay an additional 30 million euros per year in spousal support. He was ordered to pay for the education of his children and to provide them with a monthly allowance. By the time all the legal fees were paid, Marcus had lost nearly half of his net worth. But the financial losses were nothing compared to the emotional ones. His children, both of whom were in university, refused to speak to him. His son, who had idolized him, told him in a brief phone call that he was disgusted by his behavior and that he didn't want to see him again. His daughter, who had always been his favorite, simply blocked his number and refused to acknowledge his existence. His career was effectively over. No club in Europe would touch him. The scandal had made him toxic. There were offers from clubs in China and the Middle East, teams that were willing to overlook his personal problems in exchange for the prestige of having him on their roster. But Marcus couldn't bring himself to accept them. The thought of starting over in a foreign country, playing for a team that didn't matter, in front of crowds that didn't care about him, was too much to bear. He considered retirement. He considered walking away from football entirely. But football was all he knew. It was the only thing he had ever been good at. Without it, he didn't know who he was. Sophia's situation was, in many ways, worse. The initial excitement of the scandal had faded, and what remained was the reality of what she had done. She had destroyed her family. She had become a pariah in her own community. She had traded her reputation for fame, and she was discovering that fame, without respect, was a hollow and unsatisfying thing. Marcus initially had tried to make the relationship work. He had told himself that if he was going to lose everything, he might as well do it for something real. He had tried to build a life with Sophia to make the sacrifice worthwhile. But Sophia, freed from the initial excitement of the affair, began to reveal her true nature. She was shallow. She was selfish. She was more interested in the lifestyle that Marcus provided than in Marcus himself. When his financial situation began to deteriorate, when it became clear that he was no longer a billionaire, her interest in him began to wane. She started going out without him, spending time with other men, posting pictures on Instagram that suggested she was moving on. She started talking about her career, about the opportunities that the scandal had created for her, about how she was planning to launch her own fashion line and build an empire. Marcus watched this transformation with a kind of detached horror. He had destroyed his marriage, his career, his family, and his reputation for a woman who had never loved him. She had loved the idea of him, the fantasy of him, the lifestyle that he represented, but she had never loved him. When he finally confronted her about it, when he finally asked her if she had ever actually cared about him, she didn't even bother to lie. "Of course I cared about you," she said. "But I care about myself more. And right now, being with you is holding me back. You're a liability, Marcus. You're damaged goods, and I'm not going to let you drag me down with you." She moved out of the apartment they had been sharing and into a penthouse of her own, paid for by her new sponsorship deals and her growing media presence. She began dating a tech entrepreneur who was younger, richer, and less damaged than Marcus. She posted pictures of them together on Instagram, and her followers loved it. The narrative had shifted. She was no longer the homewrecker. She was the girl who had escaped a toxic situation and was building a better life for herself. Marcus, watching this unfold from his modest apartment, finally understood the full extent of his mistake. He had traded everything for an illusion. He had destroyed his marriage, his family, his career, and his reputation for a woman who had never cared about him. And in the process, he had become the villain of his own story. 6 months after the scandal, Marcus was sitting in the office of a sports psychologist, trying to understand how his life had spiraled so completely out of control. The psychologist, a woman named Dr. Elena Rocha, was patient and professional, but Marcus could see the judgment in her eyes. "You made a choice," Dr. Rocha said. "At every step of the way, you made a choice. You chose to pursue Sophia. You chose to lie to your wife. You chose to prioritize your own desires over your family's well-being. These weren't things that happened to you, Marcus. These were things you did." "I know," Marcus said. "I know that now. But at the time, I felt like I didn't have a choice. I felt like I was being pulled towards something that I couldn't resist." "That's a common rationalization," Dr. Rocha said. "But it's not true. You always had a choice. You chose not to make the hard one." The words were harsh, but they were true. And Marcus was beginning to accept that truth. He was beginning to understand that he couldn't blame Sophia, couldn't blame Isabella, couldn't blame anyone but himself. He had made the choices that had led to his downfall. He had to live with the consequences. The legal proceedings continued. The Brazilian Football Confederation announced that Marcus was banned from representing Brazil in international competitions for a period of 5 years. The ban was a formality at this point. Marcus was never going to play for Brazil again. His career at the highest level was over. He received offers to play in lower divisions, in smaller leagues, in countries where the scandal had less impact. He accepted one from a club in Portugal, a mid-tier team that was willing to give him a chance to rebuild his career. It wasn't Manchester United. It wasn't the Brazilian national team. It wasn't the pinnacle of football, but it was something. He moved to Lisbon and tried to start over. He rented a small apartment, joined the club, began training with a team that had no idea who he really was, or at least who he had been. For the first time in months, he felt like he could breathe. But the ghosts of his past followed him. The media found him in Lisbon. The story of the fallen billionaire footballer trying to rebuild his career in obscurity was too good to pass up. Journalists came to interview him. Photographers followed him. The scandal, which had seemed to be fading, suddenly roared back to life. Isabella, meanwhile, had moved on. She had used her settlement money to open a physiotherapy clinic in London, focusing on helping athletes recover from injuries. She had rebuilt her career, rebuilt her life, rebuilt herself. She was happier than she had been in years. She had found peace in the aftermath of the scandal, and she had found purpose in helping others. She gave an interview to a major magazine in which she talked about her journey, about the pain of the betrayal, about the process of healing. She was dignified and eloquent, and the interview won her a significant amount of public sympathy. People began to see her not as the wronged wife, but as a woman who had overcome adversity and built a better life for herself. Sophia, on the other hand, was struggling. Her fashion line had failed to gain traction. Her sponsorship deals were drying up. The tech entrepreneur she had been dating had moved on to someone younger and less controversial. She was discovering that being famous for a scandal was not the same as being famous for something meaningful. She tried to rebrand herself. She posted content about mental health, about the pressure of social media, about the difficulty of being in the public eye. She talked about seeking therapy, about trying to understand her own behavior, about wanting to make amends with her family. But her followers, who had loved her when she was the villain, were less interested in her redemption arc. Her Instagram engagement plummeted. Her follower count began to decline. The brands that had been interested in working with her moved on to younger, fresher influencers. She was becoming irrelevant, and the speed of that irrelevance was shocking. She reached out to Marcus, wanting to reconnect, wanting to talk about what had happened between them. But Marcus, who had spent months in therapy processing his feelings about her, had nothing left to say. He had moved past anger, past resentment, past even the desire for revenge. He simply felt empty when he thought about her. "I'm sorry," she told him in a phone call. "I'm sorry for what I did to you, to Isabella, to your family. I was young and stupid and selfish, and I ruined everything." "Yes," Marcus said. "You did. Can you forgive me?" she asked. Marcus thought about this for a long moment. He thought about the pain she had caused, the lives she had destroyed, the family she had torn apart. He thought about the fact that she was only apologizing now because her life had fallen apart, not because she had genuinely reflected on her actions. "No," he said. "I can't forgive you, but I can move past it. And I think that's all either of us can do at this point." He hung up the phone and didn't answer when she called back. 2 years after the scandal, Marcus was playing regularly for his Portuguese club. He wasn't the player he had been at Manchester United, but he was still good. He was still capable of moments of brilliance, still able to demonstrate the skill that had made him famous. But he was also older, slower, less hungry than he had been in his prime. His net worth had stabilized at around 500 million euros. He had lost half of his wealth, but he was still extraordinarily rich by any reasonable standard. He had enough money to live comfortably for the rest of his life, to provide for his children, to never have to work again if he didn't want to. But money, he had learned, was not the same as happiness. Money was not the same as peace. Money was not the same as the ability to undo the past. He had reconciled with his father, Carlos, in a brief and awkward meeting in Rio de Janeiro. His father was older now, frailer, and he seemed to have softened in his judgment. They didn't talk about the scandal directly. Instead, they talked about football, about the old days, about the dreams they had shared when Marcus was young. "I'm proud of you," Carlos said at the end of the visit. "Not for the money, not for the fame, but for the fact that you're still trying. You made a terrible mistake, but you're trying to be better. That's all any of us can do." Marcus's children had also begun to thaw toward him. His son, who was now in his final year of university, had agreed to meet him for coffee. They had talked carefully, avoiding the subject of the scandal, focusing instead on his son's studies and his plans for the future. It wasn't a reconciliation exactly, but it was a beginning. His daughter had been slower to forgive. She had been closer to him before the scandal, and his betrayal had hit her harder. But eventually, she too had agreed to see him. They had met in London, near her university, and they had walked through the park together, talking about nothing in particular, slowly rebuilding the relationship that he had damaged. Isabella had married again. She had met a man named David, a successful businessman who treated her with the kind of respect and devotion that Marcus never had. They had a small wedding in London, and while Marcus wasn't invited, he heard about it through his children. He felt a strange mixture of emotions when he heard the news. There was sadness, certainly, at the loss of what they had shared, but there was also relief, and even a kind of happiness for her. She deserved to be happy. She deserved to be with someone who would never betray her. Sofia had largely disappeared from public view. She had moved back to Rio, away from the media spotlight, away from the influencer scene that had made her famous. She had deleted her Instagram account, had stepped away from social media entirely, had tried to rebuild her life away from the public eye. According to the few sources that still followed her, she was working as a content creator for a small marketing firm, making a modest living, living a quiet life. Marcus sometimes wondered what had happened to her, whether she had genuinely learned from her mistakes, whether she had found peace in obscurity. But mostly he tried not to think about her at all. She had been a chapter in his life, a painful and destructive chapter, but a chapter nonetheless. And he was trying to move forward. 3 years after the scandal, Marcus was 38 years old and playing for a second division club in Portugal. His salary was a fraction of what it had been at Manchester United. His fame had faded. His name no longer appeared in the headlines. He had become, in many ways, ordinary. But he had also become, for the first time in his adult life, at peace. He lived in a modest apartment in Lisbon. He trained with his team. He played matches in front of crowds that were a fraction of the size of the crowds that used to watch him at Manchester United. He went to dinner with friends, went to the cinema, went for walks along the Tagus River. He lived a normal life, the kind of life that most people lived, the kind of life that he had never imagined living. He had started a foundation to help young footballers from poor backgrounds in Rio de Janeiro, providing them with training, education, and the kind of support that he had received from his own family. It was his way of trying to give back, of trying to use his experience and his remaining wealth to make a positive impact on the world. He had also started writing. He had written a memoir, a brutally honest account of his rise and fall, of the choices he had made, of the people he had hurt. The book had been published to mixed reviews. Some people saw it as a genuine attempt at redemption. Others saw it as self-serving and manipulative. But Marcus didn't write it for the reviews. He wrote it because he needed to understand his own story, needed to make sense of what had happened. One passage from the book had resonated with readers more than any other. It was a reflection on the nature of success and failure, on the price of ambition, on the things that really matter in life. I spent my entire life chasing something that I thought would make me happy. I thought it was success. I thought it was money. I thought it was fame. I thought it was the admiration of millions of people. I achieved all of those things, and I was miserable. And then I lost all of those things, and I finally found peace. It took me destroying my marriage, hurting my family, betraying the people I loved most, to understand that the things I was chasing were empty. They were illusions. They were mirages in the desert of my own ambition. The real things, the things that actually matter, are the simple things. They are love, they are family, they are integrity, they are the knowledge that you have lived your life in a way that you can be proud of. I lost all of those things in my pursuit of the illusions, and now I am trying to rebuild them, knowing that I may never fully succeed. But the trying itself has become enough. Isabella read the book and reached out to Marcus for the first time since the divorce was finalized. They met for coffee in London, a neutral location, a place where they could talk without the weight of their shared history pressing down on them too heavily. "I'm proud of you," she said. "Not for the book, not for the foundation, but for the fact that you're trying to understand what you did. That takes courage." "I'm sorry," Marcus said. "I know that doesn't fix anything. I know that doesn't undo the pain I caused. But I am genuinely sorry." "I know," Isabella said. "And I've forgiven you. Not for your sake, but for mine. I couldn't move forward if I was still holding on to the anger." They talked for 2 hours. They talked about their marriage, about the good times, about the moment when things had started to fall apart. They talked about their children, about the future, about the lives they were building separately. And by the end of the conversation, they had reached a kind of peace. Not the peace of reconciliation, but the peace of acceptance. They had loved each other once, and that love had produced 2 beautiful children and 2 decades of shared history. The fact that it had ended badly didn't negate the fact that it had been real. Marcus never saw Sofia again. He heard through mutual acquaintances that she had gotten married to a man from Rio, that she had 2 children, that she was living a quiet life away from the spotlight. He heard that she had become a mother, that motherhood had changed her, that she had finally grown up. He was glad to hear it. He hoped that she had found happiness, that she had found peace, that she had learned from her mistakes. But he also knew that her happiness, her peace, her redemption had nothing to do with him. She had to build her own life, just as he had to build his own. They had been entangled for a brief and destructive moment. But that moment was over. They had both moved on. On his 40th birthday, Marcus sat alone in his apartment in Lisbon and reflected on his life. He thought about the boy from Rio who had dreamed of playing football. He thought about the young man who had achieved that dream. He thought about the billionaire who had lost everything. He thought about the man he had become. He was no longer famous. He was no longer rich in the way that he had been. He was no longer the golden boy of Brazilian football. He was no longer the man that millions of people wanted to be. He was simply a man, aging, trying to live with integrity, trying to be better than he had been. And he realized in that moment that this was enough. This was more than enough. This was everything. The price of his betrayal had been extraordinarily high. He had paid it with his marriage, with his family, with his career, with his reputation, with half of his wealth. He had paid it with years of pain, with the knowledge of the suffering he had caused, with the understanding that he could never fully undo the damage he had done. But he had also paid it with his redemption. He had paid it with the opportunity to rebuild his life, to become a better person, to find peace in simplicity, to understand what really mattered. He had paid it with the knowledge that success and failure, wealth and poverty, fame and obscurity were all equally meaningless in the face of the fundamental human need for love, connection, and integrity. The price of betrayal was high, but the price of redemption, he had learned, was worth paying. This is the story of Marcus Santos, a man who had everything and lost it all. This is the story of how one moment of weakness, one decision made in passion rather than wisdom, can destroy an entire life. This is the story of the price of betrayal. If you want to hear more stories like this, stories of real people facing real consequences, stories that will make you think about the choices you make and the impact those choices have on the people around you, subscribe to our channel, turn on notifications so you never miss a new story, and leave a comment below telling us what you think about Marcus's journey. Did he deserve redemption? Did he pay enough for what he did? We want to hear your thoughts. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next story.